Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Thank you for joining us today for our Pali Canon and English study group. This is where we study the words of the Buddha in these books titled Buddha Vajana, which Buddha Vajana is actually means the words of the Buddha. And these book series that we're actually studying are completely the words of Gotama Buddha translated by some of the very best translators that have lived essentially in the last few decades. So pleased that you're here. We're going to be studying the first 21 chapters of this book called Kamma. And if you don't have a copy of this book, it's okay because you can actually download it from our Facebook page. If you go to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, under the Files section, you can download this version of the book in PDF format. And I'm going to be displaying it during today's class. So any questions that people have, we're going to be answering those as we get going, because all over the world, there's been various people who have been reading chapters 1 through 21. And today's class is all about the community coming together and asking any questions that they have. The people who tend to be in these classes are people who've been studying the teachings for a bit longer than kind of the average student, because we have a group learning program that's on Sunday and Wednesday where we go through this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Nibbana, which helps to really lay a strong foundation and framework to understand Gotama Buddha's teachings as a whole, as a complete and comprehensive approach to learning and practicing in order to get to this enlightened mental state where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. And the way that we start off these classes each Saturday is we start off with meditation, which I'll guide you guys in meditation here to get started in a bit. And then we'll actually start at the end of meditation. I'm going to share some things with you related to this book and particularly the natural law of Kamma before we start actually accepting questions related to the reading that folks have been doing throughout the last week. So thank you for joining. Pleased that you're here. I'd like to invite you to pull up a meditation cushion or a chair, however it is that you choose to meditate, either in the seated, lying, or standing positions. And we'll go ahead and get started with our meditation just to prepare the mind for learning the Buddha's teachings, because this really helps to calm any chatter that might be in the mind prior to actually learning the Buddha's teachings. So if this is the first time that you've joined us, then just go ahead and take a position either seated, standing, or lying where the lower body is comfortable and the upper body is nice and erect. And then just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. We'll just do a short meditation just to kind of prepare the mind for learning. Breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Fixate the mind on the breath. As the mind wanders, just cut that off, let it go, and bring the mind back to the breath. I'm going to do some chanting to ease us into meditation, and then just come back with just a little bit of guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Abhivateyami Savakhato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami สุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมมุโนสขะโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภควาติ Okay, you should be breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Just a nice, steady, consistent breath. Not a forced breath or a controlled breath, but just experiencing the full breath as you breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Should the mind wander off the breath to the past or the future, any thoughts, ideas, perceptions, just let those go, cut them off. Bring the mind back to the breath, the present moment. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind there. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now. Just let you work with the mind. Every time you see the mind come off the breath, just let it go. Cut it off. Bring the mind back to the breath. This is eliminating the unwholesome root of craving, desire, attachment, while it's cultivating mindfulness, awareness of mind. You have nowhere to go, nothing to do. No one needs you right now. Just focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะคะวะพุทธังมหาคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาคะวะตาธัมโมตามังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสัคขะโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรภูริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to just go ahead and slowly start coming out of meditation. Just a short little meditation just to kind of get the mind ready for studying and learning and retaining the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha. As we get started today in this new book that we're started this week, Buddha Vajana about Kamma, I would like to just kind of preface everything that we're going to be discussing today in our study group with just a few comments for anyone who might be new to Buddhist teachings, or even if you've been learning for a while. And particularly if you maybe have had exposure to the natural law of Kamma, or maybe you haven't had exposure to the natural law of Kamma. Gotama Buddha's teachings are all based around the natural law of Kamma. In order to understand Gotama Buddha's teachings, this entire path to enlightenment, and to actually attain enlightenment, a practitioner would need to understand the natural law of Kamma really, really well. Understand it in terms of the simplicity of it. Oftentimes, we look at the natural law of Kamma in the ways that we've learned other traditions. For most of us in the West, we're coming out of kind of a Christian background where what tends to be taught in those traditions are punishment and rewards. And there's oftentimes a lot of belief and also a lot of kind of magical or mystical things that you don't really know what is or what isn't really transpiring. Well, in Gotama Buddha's teachings, it's all about the truth and seeing the truth and being able to see it with your own eyes without belief, that there is no belief in the natural law of Kamma. And the more you understand the natural law of Kamma, the more that you can see it in everyday life. And the more that you see it, you're going to gain wisdom around the natural law of Kamma. And this is where you can start making better and better and better decisions in your life because you have the wisdom of this natural law of Kamma. And the more wisdom and the better decisions that you make, you're going to see the condition of the mind gradually improve, and you're going to see the condition of your life gradually improve. So this natural law of Kamma, it's not mystical, magical things in the sky. It's not based on belief. It's also not punishment and rewards. It's truly a natural law that exists that's essentially cause and effect, where there's some initial cause and then there's some effect or some consequence. Or another way to think about it is there's some action and then there's a result. And another way to think about it is the results of your decisions. So if you're polite, kind, respectful, friendly, then the result of that is it's going to be really easy for you to make friends. You're going to have no problem talking to people and people talking to you and feeling comfortable around you. That would be your Kamma. That would be the results of your decisions, because the cause is that you're polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. Therefore, the result is you're going to find it really easy to have relationships and spend time around people and build up a life with other people in your life. Conversely, if you were angry and hostile, impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, then you're going to find that the world is quite harsh, because what you're putting out is hostility. So therefore, what's going to be coming back to you is the same thing. So this natural law of Kamma isn't this punishment and rewards. It's not this magical, mystical thing in the sky. It's not some bank account that you're doing good things to, and then you get to collect the balance if you've got a positive balance. It's essentially the way you operate in the world, and certain actions that you do are going to have certain results or consequences. And what Gotama Buddha's teachings are doing, this whole entire path to enlightenment, specifically the Eightfold Path, is teaching you this natural law of Kamma, so that the more you understand how this natural law works amongst human beings, then the better you can make decisions in the world. So let's just take something simple like the 5 precepts. This is a very basic teaching in the natural law of Kamma, the 5 precepts. Some people look at commandments. Well, if that's what you've been taught in the past, I'm here to share with you that that's not what the 5 precepts are. They're not rules. They're not commandments. They're not even something that you should follow. They're something that you should understand, and then you should practice and see the results. So for example, the very first precept, where the Buddha talks about living compassionately, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. Essentially, he talks about not killing other beings. Well, what he's essentially talking about there is cultivating this loving kindness, cultivating this compassion with an interest to not harm other beings. What some people think that this precept says is preserve all life at all costs, right? And it's like if you walk down the street and you accidentally step on a bug, oh my goodness, now I'm going to be punished because I killed something. No, that's not what the natural law of Kamma is. It's all about you promoting and training the mind to function in a certain way. And that first precept is there in order to train the mind to function with loving kindness and compassion towards all beings, where you're not interested in harming and doing the most detrimental thing you could do to another being, which is kill it, right? So that's just one little lesson there, and we could go deep into that precept and talk more about it if people would like. The second precept about not stealing from people. This would cause harm to others if we stole things, right? And therefore, that's going to cause harm to us, because if we're willing to go around and take things from people and inflict that harm because somebody spends a lot of time, effort, energy to acquire certain products, or certain resources that they need. And if we stole that from them, that means we have no compassion or loving kindness for this other person whatsoever, that they went out and spent however many weeks or months to acquire these resources. And then by us stealing them, that's not living with loving kindness and compassion. And because we have that harshness and that hatred and that anger in the mind, that we're willing to harm other beings in that way, then that means we're harming a lot of people in lots of different ways, not just through stealing, but through things like our speech and other things like that. And then things like sexual misconduct. And the Buddha goes into a lot of detail about what sexual misconduct is. If we're harming people with the action of our bodily contact and our sexual contact by either having sex with minors or having sex with someone that's in a committed relationship, or if we're in a committed relationship and we're having sex with other people and we're doing these kind of things, it's going to cause harm to people. And therefore, we're going to have harm, right? The Buddha's first words in this third precept is abandon unchastity, where we don't sleep around with a lot of people. And we can see very clearly the natural law of Kamma, that if we sleep around with a lot of people, then we can get harmed, right? Because we can get STDs very easily. That's part of the harm. It's not somebody punishing us. It's our own decisions, this cause and effect, this action and result, that people, that we're actually going to be experiencing this, that we're going to actually be experiencing, one moment, that we're going to actually be experiencing this harm because we're causing harm in the world through our sexual contact, that we are now sleeping around with lots of people, so therefore we can easily contract sexual diseases. Or if we're doing sexual misconduct outside of a relationship that we currently have, we're causing harm to our partner, so therefore if our partner found out about it, we can get into a lot of trouble and a lot of difficulty. Or if the other person that you maybe end up having sex with, who's also in another relationship, you might get harmed from that person, right? So there's all kinds of harms that we can have. Beautiful and sweet. One moment. So there's all kinds of harms that we can experience based on our actions, which have certain results or consequences. And it's not this mystical, magical thing. It's not punishment and rewards. It's not some entity punishing us for what we're doing. It's our misunderstanding. It's our unknowing of true reality. It's our ignorance of this natural law that we're going. One moment. I'm going to just completely block this person. There we go. I was trying to be nice and just put them in a waiting room and mute them, but it wasn't working. So we'll just completely block them. All right. So it's not that an entity is actually punishing us or rewarding us. It's our misunderstanding. It's our unknowing of true reality. It's our own ignorance of this natural law that causes complications in our life. And these complications that we experience, they're coming back. Let's see. I think what I can do, there we go. I can do it that way. All right. I got that taken care of, Basem. So it's not that we're being punished or rewarded by any entity. It's not that we're being, it's not that there's this mystical, magical thing in the sky called Kamma. It's that we just don't understand in the unenlightened state this natural law. So therefore, we're making decisions on a daily basis that cause harm in the world. So therefore, that harm is going to come back to us. And the 5 precepts are just a really basic understanding of the natural law of Kamma and some of the basic things that will cause harm in the world. And if we eliminate those harms, then we'll reduce the amount of harm we're causing in the world. So therefore, we're going to reduce the amount of harm that comes back to us. But it's the Eightfold Path that fully lays out for us all of the various details of this natural law of Kamma, and all the other teachings of the Buddha explain the natural law of Kamma to us in a way that we can learn it and practice it and then see the truth for ourselves. And that's what right view is about, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, all the way through the entire Eightfold Path is sharing with us exactly what we need to know to gain this wisdom, so that now we can improve our practice. We can improve the wisdom, we can improve the moral conduct and our mental discipline, and then we'll experience better results as part of now practicing in a better way. Our actions will be improved, so therefore our results will be improved. Our causes of the things that the decisions that we're making in life are going to be better. They're going to be more informed with wisdom, so therefore the results of those decisions are going to be better. That's what the natural law of Kamma is all about. And the Buddha's teachings here are going to help you to understand this more and more and more. So I'm going to end up taking questions here real soon about anything that you guys had questions about related to the chapters in this book. One other thing before we start talking about this book is when the Buddha talks about the natural law of Kamma in some teachings, he talks about the results of Kamma. He talks about potentially being reborn in hell, being reborn in the animal realm, being reborn in the afflicted spirit realm, being reborn in the heavenly realm. And it's really important that you understand that Gotama Buddha isn't using this as a way of fear or guilt or shaming people or otherwise motivating us to learn and practice his teachings, because his teachings are really vast and extensive, and there's only certain parts where he talks about this kind of stuff, and he's just sharing it with us as the truth. Because remember, enlightenment is all about eliminating discontent feelings, where you're eliminating fear, guilt, shame, these kind of things from the mind. And an enlightened being wouldn't try to control another person. They wouldn't try to push or force somebody to do something. So therefore, when you read about, or we learn, or we talk about it today about hell or afflicted spirits or animal realm or the heavenly realm, if any questions come up related to those, understand that Gotama Buddha isn't using this as a way to fear, guilt, or shame people into learning and practicing his teachings, or otherwise motivate them to do good things just because you maybe will go to this heavenly realm. Because remember, that's not even the goal of his teachings, is to go to the heavenly realm. That's not actually the goal. The goal is to actually attain enlightenment. So when you see these things that the Buddha is talking about, these various realms, this is just him helping you to understand what true reality is. And he discovered this through his own realization of understanding the truth of what's going on in the world. And he's sharing that so that as you awaken your mind more and more and more, you may actually observe these realms yourself. So just would like to share that as we get started today, and help you to learn the teachings of the Buddha around this natural law of Kamma. So now what I'd like to do is just kind of open things up to anybody in our Zoom classroom, our Facebook group, or YouTube. If you have questions, you can put those into the comment section of Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. Our moderator, Basam, will see those and get them asked during the class. I'm going to actually display the book of this Buddha Vajana book on the screen, so that if you're on our live stream or you're in our Zoom virtual classroom, you'll be able to see the actual book live, and then we'll be able to take questions based on what you guys are interested in asking questions on through your learning. So with that, I'll just hand it over to Basam and see what questions that we have about this topic in this first 21 chapters of the natural law of Kamma. Let me take Basam off of mute, because we had to use our mute here in order to get this person who's trying to serenade us. Let's see, Bassam. Let me see how I can make you co-host. There we go. That's why you couldn't help me with this person, because you were not a co-host.
Okay, teacher. Thank you.
Okay.
Here, a question from Amina on chapter 4.
Okay, chapter 4. So let me go to chapter 4 first, and then we'll get the question asked. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, chapter 4, point number 4.
Okay, so
yeah.
Go ahead. What's the question?
Okay, the question is about point number 4. Amina says, what type of speculation in the teaching is the teaching referring to here?
Okay, so let me read this chapter, which is very short. All these chapters are fairly short. And then we'll get to Amina's question, because she's asking about item number 4. So this chapter 4, it's titled Inconceivable Matters. And inconceivable means something that you just shouldn't even try to think about, or something that you shouldn't try to figure out, right? So the Buddha's teaching here is, monks, there are these 4 inconceivable matters that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive them would reap either madness or frustration. What for? 1. The domain of Buddhas is an inconceivable matter that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive it would reap either madness or frustration. 2. The domain of one in jhana is an inconceivable matter that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive it would reap either madness or frustration. 3. The exact result of Kamma is an inconceivable matter that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive it would reap either madness or frustration. 4. Speculation about the world is an inconceivable matter that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive it would reap either madness or frustration. These are 4 inconceivable matters that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive them would reap either madness or frustration. Okay, so here's the Buddha using repetition, as he typically does, where he starts at the beginning, he opens up with a certain paragraph, he goes through 4 or 5 or 6, whatever he's talking about, and then he sums it up at the end, essentially in the same way that he started it out. And here, as I mentioned, inconceivable are things that you just shouldn't try to figure out. And he's giving these 4 things that are inconceivable, that you shouldn't try to figure out, you shouldn't try to understand, because if you did, it would either bring you madness or frustration. And the first one he talks about is the domain of Buddhas. Trying to understand an actual Buddha is an inconceivable matter, because it's hard enough for an unenlightened person to even understand what enlightenment is until you actually experience it. As you experience enlightenment more and more, then you'll understand what enlightenment is. But that's a difficult of enough task for an unenlightened person just to try to conceive and understand what enlightenment is, let alone what actually transpires among a Buddha, right? A Buddha is a very unique individual because they arise very rarely in the world. The last one that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago, and there hasn't been one since that people all understand at this current moment in time. So this fully perfectly enlightened Buddha who lived and taught, there's very unique criteria that make a Buddha a Buddha. And we know some of those criteria, most of those criteria, but how a Buddha functions and the domain of kind of what they're involved in, for the average unenlightened person to try to understand that is it's really inconceivable. It's almost ununderstandable. And even for someone who's enlightened, it's really challenging to understand how a Buddha operates, because they think very differently and they operate very differently than an average person, because their mind has so much wisdom through their independent journey to enlightenment that the way that they function in the world, the responsibility that they see for themselves in the world, and the way that they decide to move forward and make decisions in their life is very different than an average person. And while it's not harsh, it's not aggressive, it's not any of those things, it's just that they're making decisions in a unique way that is different than the average person who maybe wakes up and goes to work and does certain things that household practitioners do, or even ordained practitioners do. So a Buddha is a very unique individual that is going to function in a very unique way that the vast majority of the world isn't going to readily understand, because it's so unique and so different. So there's really no benefit for the average person to try to understand the domain of a Buddha and what a Buddha is actually involved in. What a average person should really do is learn and practice the teachings so that they can experience enlightenment. Being worried or concerned about what a Buddha is or isn't doing isn't really something that an average person should really bother themselves with, because there's so many other things for them to do in the world that this one thing is either going to create madness or frustration. Likewise, the domain of one in jhana. For a person in the unenlightened mind to understand, like I said, what enlightenment is very challenging for them, but also to understand what a jhana is also a very challenging thing for someone who's not experiencing it. So rather than concern yourself or worry yourself about what a jhana is or what a enlightenment is or what's going on with the Buddha, what the Buddha is sharing here in this teaching is, don't try to understand it or conceive it. He didn't add this part, but I will, is learn and practice the teachings so you can experience it, rather than just trying to conceive it or trying to understand it from afar. Then try to actually learn and practice the teachings so you can experience it. Now, in a recent class, I taught what the jhanas are so that you understand as you're experiencing these jhanas. But to sit down and try to figure out, exactly what jhana you're in at any one given time. Am I in the first jhana or the third jhana or the fourth jhana? And try to look at this under a microscope. It would either reap madness or frustration. So it's better to just stay focused on learning and practicing the teachings so that you can progress through the jhanas and get into the 4 stages of enlightenment, and you can experience them, and then you won't try to be conceiving them, or you won't be trying to understand them. You will be understanding them because you're actually experiencing them. This third one that he's talking about is not understanding or trying to conceive the exact result of Kamma. Now, it's really helpful to understand the natural law of Kamma, and it's really helpful to understand some of the results of what can occur if you do certain things, because this is going to help inform you about what the natural law of Kamma is. But trying to take a detailed accounting of, okay, I talked bad to my mom yesterday, so that means that these bad things are going to happen to me today or tomorrow. Or I did these really good things today, and that means I should expect some really good things happening in the next couple of weeks. If you tried to take this detailed accounting of the natural law of Kamma, it would either reap madness or frustration because you can't track Kamma that closely. There's things that we can look at and certain decisions that we can look at, and we can see, okay, if we make these decisions, good things are going to happen for us. Or if we make these type of decisions, bad things are going to happen for us. But to try to take an exact, detailed accounting of the result of Kamma would reap madness or frustration. And then the last one, which Amina's question is about, is speculation about the world. Speculation is to kind of have a theory or to guess about certain aspects of the world and how things kind of happen in the world. If you were to speculate, it's kind of like guessing, and you don't really truly know the truth. So what the Buddha is saying here is essentially don't speculate about the world, don't guess, don't just have some kind of theory that's not based on evidence. Because if you were to have some kind of theory or you were to guess about the world not based on any evidence, it's going to create madness or frustration. But instead, what he teaches all throughout his teachings is to learn, reflect, and practice the teachings so that you can see the truth for yourself about how this world works. So rather than speculate about it and just kind of guess, not based on any evidence, what he teaches all throughout his teachings is to actually learn and then independently confirm the truth for yourself so that you know through direct knowledge, you know through direct experience. And when you know the universal truth of impermanence and the universal truth of discontentedness and non-self, and you learn about the natural law of Kamma and some of these other teachings, then you're not speculating about the world. You know about the world. You have the wisdom of how these natural laws of existence work and function, and now you can better make decisions in your life to improve any kind of results or consequences that you might have so that you can produce more and more wholesome results in your life. So that's what the Buddha is talking about here, Amina and Basam, is to not guess or have unevidenced theories about what's going on in the world, but instead learn, reflect, and practice so that you know the truth and you're not guessing about things that are happening in the world.
Okay, teacher. Next question is coming from YouTube, from Alan. The question says, how does dark and bright Kamma arise? Are these negations of each other?
Okay, so this is, I believe, chapter 5, Alan. I had a feeling people were going to ask questions about this, and I've got my prepared answer for you. The Buddha was the fully perfectly enlightened Buddha, right? This man taught enormous amounts of detail about these natural laws of existence, and what we have available to us today, we kind of put those together and figure out from his teachings what it takes to get to enlightenment. And he taught all different kinds of detail about the natural law of Kamma, and this is one of those, this dark and bright Kamma. And one of the things that I'm going to share with you, and this is one of those rare cases that I'm going to do this, is that in terms of dark and bright Kamma and this whole entire chapter, I suggest that you ignore it, because what's being shared here, while the Buddha must have understood it very clearly and very detailed and had some very important things to say about this, what's actually being handed down to us and what we have today, 2,500 years later, it's not really going to help to inform your practice in a way that's going to produce some beneficial result to help you on this path to enlightenment. There's only 4 types of Kamma that anyone really absolutely needs to know as part of this path to enlightenment in order to attain enlightenment. The first one is wholesome Kamma. You need to understand what is wholesome Kamma, and you need to understand what is unwholesome Kamma. And you need to understand what is old Kamma, and you need to understand what is new Kamma. If you understand these 4, those are the only 4 that you really need to know. Even though the Buddha has a lot of other teachings around the different types of Kamma, the level of detail that's being taught there is so granular, and what we have available to us to inform us, to help us understand what he was teaching there, is not very illuminating, because I feel that impermanence has affected a lot of what we've actually gotten, of course, for 2,500 years. But based on my experience, you only are going to need these 4 types of Kamma in order to attain enlightenment: wholesome Kamma, unwholesome Kamma, old Kamma, and new Kamma. And as long as you understand these 4, that's all you need. So I'm suggesting that you put this to the side and that you don't even focus on attempting to learn this particular chapter. And that's a very rare thing that I will say about the Buddha's teachings.
Okay, next question is from Zoom, from Judith. The question is from chapter 8.
Okay.
She asks, if you could talk about mental action as the most reprehensible for the performance of evil action. And Judith continues saying, what does it mean, rod?
What does, rod. Is that what you're saying? Rod?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go through this particular chapter. It's not too long. It's a little bit longer than the ones we've looked at in the past, but let's go through this so that I can help you understand it. I'm probably not going to be able to pronounce some of these names, so I'm not even going to try. I'll just skip over them. But let me read it so that you can take some time to digest it, and then we'll walk you through to help you understand what he's teaching here. This chapter is titled The Most Reprehensible for the Performance of Evil Action. Then this particular person, who I can't pronounce their name, asked the perfectly enlightened one, "And you, friend Gotama, how many kinds of rod do you describe for the performance of evil action? For the what is this? I can't even pronounce this word. Perpetuation of evil action." I'm going to have to go back and find these words and adjust them a bit. I can't even pronounce them. This person, the Tathagata, is not accustomed to use the description rod. The Tathagata is accustomed to use the description action, right? So this is probably a person from another group, probably not somebody within the Buddhist community, because remember, during the Buddha's lifetime, there were various groups, there were various teachers that were teaching that they had the path to enlightenment, and the Buddha knew that he had the path to enlightenment because he had attained it for himself. But there was these other teachers who were teaching various teachings that they might have had some similarities to the Buddha's, but they weren't exactly the same. So what I suspect this person is someone who's coming into the Buddha's community, the Buddha's community of his ordained and household practitioners, and learning from him and using this term rod. And the Buddha's saying, I'm not used to using that word. I'm used to using action, right? So he's used to talking about action, not using this word rod. So I don't know what that word rod is, and the Buddha didn't use it either. So I'm not quite sure what that was referring to. So when the Buddha made this person aware that he doesn't use that word, now this person goes on. But friend Gotama, how many kinds of action do you describe for the performance of evil action? For this word, preparation of evil action. And now the Buddha says, I describe 3 kinds of action for the performance of all evil action. For the evil action, there's bodily action, there's verbal action, and there's mental action. Now let me pause here for a minute. This is where the Buddha will sometimes talk about body, speech, and mind. Now you can relate this to the Eightfold Path because bodily action is right action. That's what right action is all about, is bodily action. Verbal action is all about right speech. So when you see the Buddha talk about verbal action, he's really looking at his teachings on right speech. And when you hear him talk about mental action, here this is mostly about right intention, because right intention, right speech, and right action are mind, speech, and body. But here it's just flipped around a little bit. And of course, there's also mental action in the upper part of the Eightfold Path, which is right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. But you can see the real core of the Buddhist teachings around bodily action, verbal action, and mental action right there in the second step, third step, and fourth step of the Eightfold Path. Right intention, right speech, and right action. So now this person goes on. How then, friend Gotama, is bodily action one, verbal action another, and mental action still another? This actually leads me to think even more that this person is probably from some other group that's coming in and trying to understand the Buddhist teachings as he's been learning from somebody else, right? This person, if they were one of Gotama Buddha's disciples, they probably would have prefaced it with venerable and then this person's name. But when they talk about this person here, they didn't use venerable, they used another name. So he's probably not a student that is dedicated to learning and practicing with the Buddha, but just trying to get some insight from him about how the Buddha actually teaches. So the Buddha goes on and says, bodily action is one, verbal action is another, and mental action is still another. So now he says, of these three kinds of action, friend Gotama, thus analyzed and distinguished, what kind of action do you describe as the most reprehensible for the performance of evil action? For the evil actions of bodily actions, verbal actions, or mental actions? Like, which one is worse? Which one has the potential to create the most evil? Bodily actions, verbal actions, or mental actions? So the Buddha says, of these three kinds of actions, thus analyzed and distinguished, I describe mental action as the most reprehensible for the performance of evil action. For evil action of not so much bodily action and verbal action. So he's saying, hey, mental action is the worst, with the worst possible outcome is mental action versus bodily or speech. So now this person is going to go on and try to get the Buddha to confirm this multiple times. Do you say mental action, friend Gotama? I say mental action. Do you say mental action, friend Gotama? I say mental action. Do you say mental action, friend Gotama? I say mental action. So this person is like really wanting to make sure the Buddha is on record for saying absolutely mental action is the most evil among bodily action, verbal action, and mental action. Mental action has the potential to create the most evil. Thus, this person made the perfectly enlightened one maintain his statement up to the third time, 3 times, after which he rose from his seat and then he went to this other group. So this, I think that this name here is actually he went to another group. Thereafter, the householder, this particular household practitioner who's a student of the Buddha, came to the Buddha and asked about the conversation that he had with this other person, because they were in debate about bodily action is the most reprehensible that this person feels. This person that the Buddha talked to, the Buddha said mental action is the most evil, but this other person thinks that bodily action is the most evil. That's what this italicized part is talking about here. That this other person who asked the Buddha to confirm that mental action is the most evil, this other person is saying, no, bodily action is the most evil, not verbal and mental. And then the perfectly enlightened one, the Buddha, maintained his teaching, and then he spoke further. He said, and so the Buddha is now going to give a story, a simile, to support why he's saying mental action is the most evil. He's going to prove it to them by helping them see the truth for themselves, not based on belief, but he's going to walk them through step by step so they can see the truth for themselves. So here the Buddha says, what do you think, householder? Is this town successful and prosperous? Is it populous and crowded with people? And the householder confirms, yes, venerable sir, it is. So this town is very successful and has lots of people. What do you think, householder? Suppose a man came here brandishing a sword and spoke thus, in one moment, in one instant, I will make all the living beings in this town into one mass of flesh, into one heap of flesh. What do you think, householder? Would that man be able to do that? So what the Buddha is doing is saying, here's a bodily action, right? Because these other people are claiming that bodily action is the worst, that's the most evil action. So the Buddha is saying, okay, here's an evil action. Somebody comes into your town that is successful and crowded and says, I'm going to take this sword and I'm going to essentially kill a whole bunch of people and create one massive amount of flesh, right? What do you think, householder? Would that man be able to do that? Would he be able to, in one instant, be able to create all this death with the sword? And the householder replies, Venerable sir, 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50 men would not be able to make all the living beings in this town into one mass of flesh, into one heap of flesh in one moment or instant. So what does a single trivial man count for? So this householder is saying, there's no way that this one man could do one bodily action and kill all these people in an instant. Not only could one man not do it, but 10 men, 20 men, 30 men, 40 men, 50 men wouldn't even be able to kill everybody in this town in one simple action. So one bodily action wouldn't be able to kill all these people. So now the Buddha says, what do you think, householder? Suppose some recluse or Brahmin came here possessed of supernormal power and attained to mastery of the mind, and he spoke thus, I will reduce this town to ashes with one mental act of hate. What do you think, householder? Would such a recluse or Brahmin be able to do that? And now the householder says, Venerable sir, such a recluse or Brahmin possessed of supernormal power and attained to mastery of mind would be able to reduce 10, 20, 30, 40, or even 50 of these people into ashes with one mental act of hate. So what does a single trivial person count for? So now this person is on record saying, yes, this mental action could actually cause a lot of harm. One act of hate, right? Because the way the natural law of Kamma is if one person does an act of hate, that's going to have a cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. And now that hate spreads all throughout the town, right? So this person's now on record saying, yes, if somebody came into our town and did one act of hatred, this is going to damage our entire town. So now the Buddha says, householder, pay attention. How you reply. What you said afterwards, like what he just said, does not agree with what you said before. Nor does what you said before agree with what you said afterwards. So basically, the householder is saying up here at the top that bodily action is the worst, most evil action that could occur. But when the Buddha questioned him and gave him an example of someone with a sword, he said, no, that's not going to cause much harm. There's no way somebody could cause that much harm with just one act of killing with a sword. But the Buddha then asked him about this mental action of having hate. And he confirms, the householder confirms, yes, that would cause a lot of harm in our town. So the Buddha basically walk this person through and help them see how what the Buddha said originally about mental action is the most evil and the most harmful, as opposed to verbal action or bodily action. But rather than the Buddha just saying it and having everyone believe it, he walked them through an example and essentially helped them to teach themselves. So that's what this teaching is about. I would like to, Basam, have you repeat Judith's question, because I would like to make sure that I answer the whole question, because I know that I answered the part about rod, but I would like to make sure I answer the other part of her question.
Sure, teacher. Judith was asking about some clarification about mental action.
Okay, so mental action is like right intention, right? So right there in right intention in the Eightfold Path, the Buddha talks about renunciation, having the interest to let things go. And he also talks about practicing non-ill will. And he talks about practicing harmlessness. That would be right intention, where we have good mental actions. But harmful mental actions are things like this, where he's talking about an act of hate. An act of hatred would be wrong intention. And by having a mental action of hatred towards somebody, what he's saying is this is a very, very evil action, that it's going to cause untold amounts of harm in the world, so therefore it's going to cause harm to you. So he's saying out of everything, we need to purify our mental actions. Because if you think about it, our speech and our actions come from our mind. If the mind is purified, then the speech and the actions are going to be purified too. So to try to only fix the bodily actions, or to think that bodily actions are the worst, like these people were saying to the Buddha's like, no, bodily actions aren't the worst, because what the Buddha is saying is mental actions are the most evil and the most harmful, because if there's hate in the mind, then that's going to essentially move to the speech and the actions. So the whole discipline of what the Buddha is teaching is all about purifying the mind and training the mind. But of course, there is that part in there where he teaches about right speech, right action, or right livelihood, but he makes right intention a prerequisite and kind of like a precursor to this path, because without purifying the mind and practicing non-ill will and harmlessness, you would never be able to get to right speech and right action if the mind was still polluted with hate. So mental action is all about the things that you're thinking, about your thoughts, and particularly the Buddha is really teaching about eliminating anger, hatred, and ill will from the mind, because it's so detrimental to your entire practice, and it causes you issues in your speech and your actions as well. If you only purified your speech and your actions, but your mind was still polluted, then the mind isn't enlightened. It's not going to experience a peaceful existence. So one has to actually purify the mind so that then it can actually be replicated and be in sync with one's speech and actions as well.
Okay, teacher. Next question is from chapter 12.
All right.
Yes. Last line. I alone, or one like me, may pass judgment on people. The question is, why would a Buddha need to look down or judge some other practitioners?
Okay, this is a great question. I'm glad you guys are asking this one. So let's just read through it first. Chapter 12, Judgment Regarding People. Because the teaching's stream carries him along, but one who can know this difference except the Tathagata. Therefore, Ananda, do not be judgmental regarding people. Do not pass judgment on people. Those who pass judgment on people harm themselves. I alone, or one like me, may pass judgment on people. Okay, so let's talk about what judgment is, and then talk about what a Buddha actually does. So judgment is to, yes, look at somebody and determine whether or not their conduct is wholesome or unwholesome. And oftentimes in the unenlightened mind, people do this with arrogance. So they'll look at somebody's bodily actions, verbal actions, or mental actions, and this person will try to determine, is this a wholesome action or is this an unwholesome action? Or is this a wholesome speech or unwholesome speech? Is this a wholesome mental action or unwholesome mental action? And then as the person is doing that, they will look down with arrogance on this person. And the Buddha is saying nobody should do this except for an actual Buddha, because a Buddha is a fully, perfectly enlightened Buddha. They are perfect in their bodily actions, their verbal actions, and their mental actions. They have no ego whatsoever. They've completely ascended to enlightenment and no longer have any defilements in the mind whatsoever. It's been completely purified in the most pure way possible. And this individual is not putting themselves up above others, but they have the unique ability to look at a certain situation with complete clarity and to determine what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. But they don't do that as a way of being arrogant about the person and judging them or putting them down. That's what the average person would do, is once they determine whether something is wholesome or unwholesome, they will put the person down and made to feel low because this person is being arrogant, because they still have ego perhaps. But a Buddha doesn't have that arrogance in the mind. A Buddha's only interest, their only interest in the entire world, is to share the teachings that led to their enlightenment so that more and more and more and more people in the world can attain enlightenment. Countless people during their lifetime can attain enlightenment, and that they leave the teachings in such a way that after their death, countless more people can attain enlightenment. That is absolutely their only goal whatsoever. They're not interested in monetary wealth. They're not interested in fame and fortune. They're not interested in anything whatsoever but helping people see true reality. And a perfectly fully enlightened Buddha can see true reality very clearly, and they can see the natural law of Kamma very clearly, more than anyone else. They no longer have a self, they no longer have conceit, and they no longer have perceptions. They're looking at things in a very pure way, more so than any other individual. So if two people were talking, a Buddha would be able to clearly see what is wholesome speech and what is unwholesome speech, because they're seeing so clearly, because they don't have any defilements or any pollution in the way. But somebody else, not only an unenlightened being, but even enlightened beings, because enlightened beings aren't perfectly enlightened like a Buddha. An enlightened being still has some things that aren't 100% truth in their mind. They understand the truth. They understand the natural laws of existence and the natural law of Kamma, but their practice still isn't the same as a fully perfectly enlightened Buddha, and their motivations aren't the same as a fully perfectly enlightened Buddha. A fully perfectly enlightened Buddha is only interested in helping people to attain enlightenment and ensuring that the teachings are in a condition that upon their death, more and more people will attain enlightenment. Enlightened beings have many different motivations. They are still going to be enlightened. They still have eliminated discontentedness. They still understand the truth of these natural laws of existence, but there's certain motivations that they have beyond just sharing the teachings in the world and being able to see very clearly through a perfectly enlightened mind what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. So a Buddha isn't judging in terms of looking down on people and being arrogant. He's essentially judging what is wholesome speech and what is unwholesome speech, what are wholesome actions and what are unwholesome actions, what are wholesome mental actions and what are unwholesome mental actions. And then when they see this and it becomes clear about the student that they're working with that there's certain wholesomeness and certain unwholesomeness, a Buddha is not going to make that person feel bad about it. A Buddha is actually going to help them with teachings to improve their wholesome conduct and make it even better. And any unwholesome conduct, they're going to help them by pointing that out and helping them to improve. So a Buddha's motivation is to help to shed light on what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, to help this individual improve their practice, and they don't have any vested interest in anything else other than to help that person attain enlightenment. Where a enlightened being, even an enlightened being, and particularly an unenlightened being, isn't necessarily going to have that same clarity of mind as a Buddha, isn't going to be able to see the wholesome and unwholesomeness, and their motivation isn't necessarily to help this individual attain enlightenment like a Buddha. So that's why the Buddha is saying here is that him alone or one like him, meaning a new Buddha would be able to see very clearly the natural law of Kamma and be able to observe what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, and then be able to support this person in improving their wholesome conduct and also improving their unwholesome conduct, but would never look down on the individual as part of that learning process.
Okay, teacher. Next question is from chapter 16.
All right, let's go to chapter 16. Here we go.
Yeah, page 31.
Okay.
Yeah, last paragraph.
The last paragraph, page 31. Okay.
Yeah, it starts with, so it seems, friend Nigathas, that it is impossible that an action whose result is to be experienced here and now can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced in the next life. The question is, what kind of actions or karma should be experienced in a next or future life?
Okay. I'm not on the same page as you, but it's okay because I understand the question. Is what the Buddha is sharing is that not all Kamma is experienced in this life, if there's going to be rebirth. For an enlightened being, all Kamma is going to be experienced in this life. All unwholesome Kamma is going to be extinguished prior to attaining enlightenment as part of the path to attaining enlightenment. And an enlightened being is no longer going to be reborn, so there's not going to be any future Kamma in a future life. But for an unenlightened being, there's going to still be future lives. So there's going to be Kamma that's experienced in future lives. Exactly what that is, that goes back to that other chapter that we studied, that it would create madness or frustration for you to try to figure out exactly what that is. But we can talk about a few things that will probably help you. If somebody is unenlightened, then that means that they're experiencing their Kamma, and they're experiencing wholesome Kamma, some, and they're also experiencing some unwholesome Kamma. And let's just say this person isn't even in the first stage of enlightenment, that they're just on the path or maybe in the jhanas. This person is going to be reborn into a lower realm of existence. They're not going to be reborn in the human realm or the heavenly realm. So that by itself, just being reborn into hell, afflicted spirits, or the animal realm, is Kamma. Because of the decisions that we make in this life, it's going to then produce some kind of result. And that's Kamma to be experienced in a future life. Also, whatever craving that exists at the time of death, that craving is going to move forward into the new mind. That craving in the new mind is going to produce new Kamma in that new life. This is where an understanding of new Kamma and old Kamma is very helpful, is that it's going to produce new Kamma because that craving from your previous life is going to go forward into the new life, and now that craving is going to produce new Kamma in that life, and that's why it's got to be extinguished in that new life. So there's a lot of things that can be encountered in future lives, but it's all based on what's going on right now. So anything that happened in your previous lives, yes, you're going to have to experience that as part of your current life if you're going to attain enlightenment in this life. But it's not like there's this mystical, magical bank account somewhere of punishment and rewards that are happening as part of your previous lives that are creating results in this life. It's actually the craving from your previous lives coming forward into this life that now you're creating new Kamma in this life. So let me just give you an example. Let's say in a previous life you were a thief. Let's just take an unwholesome one, right? Because those are kind of interesting to talk about sometimes. Let's just say you were a thief and a robber and you used to steal things from people and you ended up dying. And then at some point along the way, you got reborn back into the human realm. And there's no more Kamma from that previous life that's going to just magically appear in this new life. But the craving to steal from that previous life is now in the mind of this new being in this life. And now when this new being has that craving and acts upon that and starts stealing from people just like it did in its previous life, now it's going to produce new results. It's going to produce new Kamma. And the person can go to jail, they can get beat up, they can get murdered, all different kinds of things can happen to them in this life. It's not because they robbed in the last life that there's some magical conduit that's zapping them and making bad things happen for them in this life. It's because the craving that's coming forward is producing new Kamma, that now they're experiencing the results of those new actions in this life. And beyond this is how the Buddha would say, to understand Kamma exactly and its results would create madness or frustration. And then likewise, if we want to talk about a wholesome thing, like let's just say somebody in their past life was very loving and very compassionate, that can also move forward into a new existence. And now you find it very easy to be loving and kind and compassionate in this life. And that's a quality of mind that's very easy for you to practice because you also practiced that in a previous life. So now with that loving kindness and compassion, you find it very easy to practice that in this life. So therefore, you're going to reap the rewards and the benefits of practicing loving kindness and compassion in this life. So you can think of all these different lives as like one stream of consciousness. Even though they're all individual lives, they're kind of like one stream of consciousness that the beings have to, in their individual existences, they have to work out all of these cravings and work out all of these problems. So wherever you are right now on this path, if you have some loving kindness but not so much, or some compassion not so much, some generosity or not so much, or maybe you have some hatred or something like that, these are all things that you've encountered in this life, but they've also been carried forward from your previous lives. And it's not until you figure out all of these natural laws of existence and you extinguish all these unwholesome qualities and produce all these wholesome qualities that you're going to experience a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy, which is the enlightened mind. And once you figured it out throughout this whole stream of lives, then you'll no longer be reborn because you've gained the wisdom that you needed. So by actively learning and practicing these teachings, you will clear up all of this unwholesomeness and produce lots and lots of wholesome things, eventually getting to this enlightened mind where you will no longer need to come back because you don't have to figure it out anymore. You've already figured it out and you can escape this whole cycle of rebirth.
Okay, teacher. Next question from chapter 20.
All right, chapter 20.
Yes, paragraph number 4.
Okay.
Monks, here's a mention of the perfectly enlightened ones. What's known until now that he was only one Buddha, one perfectly enlightened one. Here, there's a mention of perfectly enlightened ones of the past.
Yeah, this is one of the rare conflicts that I've found in the Pali Canon, that there's one piece of teaching where the Buddha talks about him being the originator, the discoverer, the declarer of the path to enlightenment, undeclared before, which makes it appear that he was the only Buddha. But then there's other teachings where he actually talks about other Buddhas. And then here's one where he's referring to other perfectly enlightened Buddhas of the past. So there is this one area that I see conflict. And the thing that I do is I chalk this up to impermanence. In reality, it doesn't really matter how many Buddhas there has been, whether there's one or whether there's been 100. The point is that right now you're in the human realm, your mind is unenlightened, and you need to attain enlightenment to escape this cycle of rebirth. And the teachings that we have available to us are the teachings of Gotama Buddha. We don't have any teachings of any other Buddha available to us. His are the only ones that are available to us. So whether there was one Buddha or there was 100 Buddhas, we will never really truly know 100%, I don't feel, because there's no independent way for us to determine this. But even if we determined, okay, there is 100 Buddhas, now what? You still have an unenlightened mind that needs to be trained and attain enlightenment. Okay, well, let's say that we can independently prove that there was only one Buddha. Okay, well, you still have an unenlightened mind. You still need to learn and practice the teachings to train the mind to attain enlightenment. So knowing whether there was one or 100 Buddhas, it doesn't actually make a difference to whether you need to actually learn and practice the teachings to attain enlightenment or not. There is this one particular difference that I've uncovered in the Pali Canon, and I just chalk it up to impermanence because the text that we're dealing with 2,500 years later is not going to be perfect because of the impermanence, because of the universal truth of impermanence. And I can't remember whether it's in this book or some future book. I think it's in a future book that we're going to read, where you'll see the Buddha talks about the future Buddha to come that is essentially going to sort all this out, right? The Buddha talked during his lifetime how at this point in history that the teachings would be in such conflict and such disarray that people wouldn't even really understand what it is that he actually taught and what the path to enlightenment is. And he talked about a future Buddha, Maitreya, who's actually going to come and sort all this out so that people will understand what the true actual teachings are. So this is one place where there's conflict in terms of the teachings, but it really doesn't matter. The point is that you need to learn and practice to attain enlightenment. How many Buddhas there were, it really doesn't matter, truthfully.
Yes, very clear picture. Okay, the same chapter and the same paragraph. Second line, a doctrine of Kamma. This one is clear. A doctrine of deeds may be clear. Third one, a doctrine of energy. What kind of energy is being referred to here?
Yeah, I'm not sure what this energy that he's referring to, or if this word has even been translated properly, right? Because we don't know 100% of exactly what the Buddha taught. I understand the teachings that will guide you to enlightenment, and I'm able to fully, completely help you attain enlightenment through this path. But there's a few things like this here and there that we look at and we're just like, not quite sure, what exactly he was talking about there, unless he's referring back to the 7 factors of enlightenment, where we talk about the enlightenment factor of energy, right? So we don't really know 100%, but again, I can tell you that if you knew this or you don't know this, it's not really going to change anything about how you learn and practice these teachings. The natural law of Kamma is something that you absolutely need to know. Understanding that actions or deeds are what's the origination of Kamma, and then there's the results. But this doctrine of energy, I'm not sure what he was talking about there, or if we've even translated that word properly or not. But it's not something that I would say that you need to understand in order to attain enlightenment.
Okay, teacher. Last question from the next chapter, chapter 21.
Okay.
Yes, here are 3 kinds of Kamma. The first one in this very life, second one in the next rebirth, third one on some subsequent occasion. So again, what is the Buddha referring to here?
Yeah, here's what I say that he's referring to. Let me just read this. Chapter 21. Result of Kamma is threefold. And what is the result of Kamma? The result of Kamma, I say, is threefold, to be experienced in this very life, on your next rebirth, or some subsequent occasion. That is called the result of Kamma. This, monks, is called action's fruit. Okay? The some subsequent occasion is any life beyond the next rebirth. So he's basically saying you're going to experience Kamma in this life right now that you're experiencing right now, in your very next life, or some life beyond that. And when you marry this up to some of his other teachings on Kamma, where he talks about, beings have Kamma as their heirs, as their relatives, anything they do, wholesome or unwholesome, essentially you can't run and hide from anything that you've done, either wholesome or unwholesome, that you will need to experience the results of all your decisions. So essentially, he's making that clear here, is that it's either this life, your next rebirth, or some future life beyond that. That's when you're going to experience your Kamma. You can't escape it. So the wise practitioner, knowing that any wholesome Kamma or any unwholesome Kamma, or let me rephrase that without using this word Kamma, any wholesome action or any unwholesome action that you take, you're going to experience that result, either in this life, your next life, or some future life. So the wise practitioner, knowing this, would make every effort that they can in learning the natural law of Kamma and improving their conduct, so that you're only producing wholesome actions in this life. Because the way that you extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma is by producing only wholesome Kamma. By you to extinguish all your unwholesome actions that you've done in the past and now, is by you improving your conduct, improving your actions, and only making wise decisions that are wholesome. This is going to lead to more and more wholesome results for you. And essentially, you're going to extinguish all your unwholesome decisions that you've made in the past and that you're making currently. So a wise practitioner, knowing that any unwholesome decisions that you make, you're going to meet those consequences, then you would make every effort you can to learn this natural law of Kamma and ensure that you're making only wholesome decisions. So right now, if you're, not practicing the teachings to perfection, which I imagine that's the vast majority of the world, then you got to understand those areas of your life where you're not practicing the teachings closely, and clean that up and make it better, so that in this life you can have the goal and you can achieve enlightenment, so that you won't be experiencing any negative consequences in your next life or any future lives beyond that.
Okay, teacher. Thanks for your help. No more questions for now.
Okay, so we're diving into these books in more detail, and we've got another 20 chapters left in this book, Kamma. So for the next week, students are going to be reading chapters 22 through chapter 44 in this book, Kamma. If you don't have this book yet, you can go to our Facebook group and go to the files menu and download it. I've got it in there that you can download it as a PDF, or if you'd like to order the printed versions, I still have some sets here that I can send. You just need to go to our website, buddhadailywisdom.com, to order these. The program is going to continue here on Saturdays, where I'm just making myself available to any questions that you guys have. As you guys know, on Sunday and Wednesday, I have a very structured approach to how I share the teachings from the book Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Nibbana. But on Saturdays, it's more of like a free-form questions based on your independent study. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this program, it's more like a PhD program where everybody's independently studying on their own and coming to your advisor for any guidance based on what you're actually reading in your own personal journey of diving into these books and investigating these books. So that's going to continue each Saturday as we go here into this new year. But on Sunday and Wednesday, that's where we're going to be doing the group learning program, where there's a structured discussion around structured topics. This Sunday, being tomorrow, we're going to be in chapter 1 of this book. So if you haven't been part of this program yet, on Sunday and Wednesday, you can join right in, and you can once again download this book, or you can order a printed copy, and you can start reading. And these chapters are quite short, maybe 20, 30 minutes. There's one or two that might be an hour long to read. But on Sundays, I'm going to be giving a talk on each individual chapter. And then on Wednesday, we do either breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, or Buddhist chanting. And you can learn the path through this book, because if you haven't been learning the Theravada Buddhist teachings, which are the teachings of the elders, which are considered to be the form of Buddhist teachings that's closest to the lifetime of the Buddha, then diving into these books is oftentimes really challenging, because you don't have a real framework and a real foundation in which to build your practice on. So I encourage everyone to really take the group learning program on Sunday and Wednesdays. And then if you would like to join into this program, you can do this program as well. But typically this program is going to really help fill in various areas of a practice that has already been established through learning with this other book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Nibbana, where we meet on Sunday and Wednesday at 9 p.m. Thai time, right here at the same place, either in Facebook, YouTube, Zoom. We also do this on Twitch and Periscope, as well as our podcast. So you'll be able to take in the classes on Sunday and Wednesday live, but then if you're not able to attend, you can always learn from the replay, either in Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Periscope, or our podcast. So thank you all for joining the class. Thank you all for your dedication and time to learn and practice Gotama Buddha's teachings. I'll either see you tomorrow in the group learning program, where we're going to learn chapter 1, which is titled The Universal Teachings, Universal Love of All Beings, Do No Harm, Be a Good Moral Person. Or I'll see you on Wednesday, where we're going to be doing loving kindness meditation as a group. We're going to be actually doing loving kindness meditation together. Or next Saturday, we're going to be finishing up this book of Kamma, going from chapter 22 to 44. I'll be accepting any questions that you guys have at that time. So between now and then, just continue with your meditation practice, continue learning and practicing. Post any questions that you have in the Facebook group. Reach out to me privately through private message, or you're welcome to schedule a personal discussion with me if you like, and we can dive into some of these details and really get into some of the specifics of them above and beyond the classes that we're hosting here in all these various venues. So thank you for joining. I'll see you either Sunday, Wednesday, or Saturday, and perhaps maybe all of those times. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you very much. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.